Welcome to Therapy Explained, where we explain, demystify, and destigmatize mental health and mental health treatment. My name is Deniss. I'm a licensed therapist and owner of a group practice in California that supports the mental health of BIPOC adults in individual and couples therapy. But here on Therapy Explained, I am your host, where we talk about all things mental health. Today we're going to be talking about how you can get started on that inner child work. Now, I have a previous video on things that you can do to help heal your inner child, and inner child work, of course, is a whole journey. So if you want to check out that video, go ahead and do so. And today, remember, is just another piece of information for you in that journey. Before we jump into the video, remember to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and give this video a thumbs up if you find it helpful at any point. Also, a quick and very big thank you to all those of you who leave very kind and supportive comments on my past videos. It's good to know that I am supporting you and helping you at least a little bit. I know that we are not one-on-one, and of course, there's no way for me to know the individual details of your experience, but I'm happy to know that these conversations are helping you get more insight into your own patterns and hopefully also encouraging you to seek the support that you might need. With all that being said, let's go ahead and get started on today's topic. What is inner child work? Before we get more into this conversation, let's just get on the same page. What is inner child work? You might have a general understanding of what it is, which is probably why you're here. Or maybe you heard about it and you think it might be helpful, but are not quite sure what exactly this means, which is why it can get difficult to get started because we don't know what it looks like or what it's supposed to be, even if we feel like it might be helpful. So let's talk about it. Inner child work is based on the idea that the relationship that you had with your parents, whether they were present or not, is going to be the template for the kind of relationship that you have with yourself and with other people as you grow up. Now, this does also include any sort of childhood wounds that you may have. If you were abandoned or, yes, also experienced any sort of trauma when you were a child, that will imprint on your nervous system and will lead you to develop certain patterns and certain behaviors to help keep you safe and protected. But these wounds, these traumas might also be activated for you now as a grown-up. And the reason why it's so important for us when we were also doing some mother and father wound healing is that this inner child is the part of you that needs that healing, that is calling for those things. And so when we talk about reparenting ourselves and healing those wounds, what it needs for us to do is to identify what part of us is being triggered, what part of our inner child or our childhood experiences is kind of being poked at and feeling pretty sore, if not extremely painful. And the wonderful piece about that, though, is that when we're able to identify that, we can then take on the role of the parent or the caregiver that we wish we had had and start doing some of that work. Identify your inner child. The first thing to know is that your inner child isn't one particular age. We're not speaking to, okay, it's just you when you were 4, or it's just you when you were 9, it's just you when you were 16. It's actually various parts of you, and you might need to speak to those various ages in which you were in. This work requires you to revisit some of those potentially traumatizing, hurtful moments in your life. And those are the parts of you that need healing, that need caring for, and that need some attention. So again, your inner child might not be just one version of your child, but it might be several versions. And so when you're doing the work, you're identifying which versions of you, which parts of you those are. One of the questions that you can ask yourself is, does this remind me of any previous experience? Could this be connected to my childhood experience with my parents? And again, this is within the context of understanding your childhood and healing your child wounds or your childhood wounds. And this doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be activated solely with your parents. These childhood wounds might be activated in friendships, in romantic relationships, at work perhaps. If we were made to feel that we weren't important, or we were looked down on or punished or dismissed as children, these moments, again, as grown-ups with anybody else, might activate that inner child in us. And that is the part that needs caring for. Might also help to pay attention to how your body is feeling. If there's any situations in which you felt extremely overwhelmed, panicked, your muscles were probably very tense, your breathing was probably very rapid, or perhaps you were holding your breath. These might also be cues that your inner child is being triggered, because this is probably triggering also a fight or flight response. Reflect on those childhood experiences. So once you know what part of your inner child might be being activated or what experiences you're being reminded of, we want to try to reflect on those experiences. Now I'm about to share some questions with you that can be really helpful to explore when you're journaling or out loud with yourself, or even to bring to therapy if you already have that support. But I do want to say that piece, that support is important. As I've mentioned, a lot of this inner child work means revisiting painful situations, and that itself can be overwhelming. And so I strongly encourage you to seek support from a mental health professional, someone who is trained and educated in these issues. It can help you develop the coping tools that you need. Because in order to answer some of the questions I'm about to share with you, you might need to practice helping yourself feel safe enough to revisit some of these situations. And how do we do that? How do we develop these coping tools? How do we develop that safe space? Usually, therapy is the best place to do that. Now, that being said, here are some questions that you can ask yourself if you want to reflect on some of these experiences. How did I feel in this situation? What kind of messages did I receive about safety because of this experience? About love because of this experience? Did this experience help me feel safer or important to my parents? Did I feel like I mattered to the grown-ups in my life? A lot of these questions can help you better understand what your child needed in that moment, which leads us to also a very important question. What did I actually need in that moment from a grown-up? Was it a hug? Was it a helpful, kind word? Was it both? All of the above, maybe a little bit of something else. Soothe your inner child. This next phase is not so much at the beginning of your journey. This might be somewhere a little bit in the middle of it. But if you can start to identify some ways in which you can soothe your inner child and take care of your inner child, this might be a really good basis. So just start thinking about some of those things in relation to the last question I just shared. What could you have needed in that moment, and practicing giving that to yourself now? You can practice hugging yourself, practice some affirmations, maybe also even practice how to express to other people that that's what you need. If you have a partner, can you practice letting your partner know, hey, I'm in need of some love. Can you tell me that you love me? Can you hug me? Can you hold my hand? Can you hold me for a moment? So practicing these things with the people that you feel safe with can also be helpful in learning how to soothe your inner child, because remember that this journey, while it is yours, it does not have to happen alone. Seek support. I know, I just can't help myself. I'm a therapist. I cannot let you go without talking about how important it is to seek support. We've talked about throughout this video how we might be revisiting those painful moments. That is exactly what inner child work is recognizing, where did this wound originate for me? How is my inner child being activated or triggered in this moment? And how can you learn to meet those needs? That means going to these uncomfortable places. And if you don't know how to sit in the discomfort, you're more likely to run away from it or to further wound yourself by judging yourself or being mean to yourself about this experience. This is also a very different way and unique way of thinking about yourself. It might feel strange to think of your inner child because you're a grown-up, and then how do you talk to your inner child? Do you talk to them out loud? Do you pretend that they're there? Am I talking to a plant? Like, how does this actually work? And it can feel a little strange. So if you have the support from someone who guides you and can help you figure out what the best way to go about this, it can be very helpful in your process when you get stuck. A therapist can help you understand your childhood. A lot of what you do when you first start with a therapist is explore your childhood, especially a psychoanalytical therapist, is let's talk about your parents. Let's talk about what it was like for you growing up. And that's when you can identify some of those childhood wounds. Your therapist can also help you identify particular interventions and questions to ask. Remember, a lot of these videos that I make them very general. I don't know you or your experience. I'm not your therapist, and so I cannot really tailor some of these questions or some of these interventions to your experience, but your therapist can. Together you can experiment and explore and figure out what works for you, also in a way that feels like it aligns. There are some things that I might talk about in this video that you might not feel ready to explore or might feel like it's not necessary to explore, and that's okay. So if you're in the room with someone who knows that, that's even better. If you do feel ready to seek that extra support, I will always leave a link down at the bottom for resources on my practice website where you can find other resources, including directories. Of course, if you live in California, we are an option for you if you are interested in starting therapy, but you also don't have to do that with us. My favorite directories will be in these resources where you can find someone that might be a better fit for your budget, for the kind of identity that you want your therapist to have, perhaps even the location. Are you gonna want to do it virtually or in person? So you can filter for a lot of these things in these directories. Go ahead and check them out. Even if you're just a little bit curious, just look at what's out there. It doesn't hurt. I hope that today's video was yet another tool for you in your toolbox to help you manage some of these aspects of your mental health. If it was, if you felt that it was helpful and that you learned something, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already for more videos on mental health. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.